In 2007, I briefly separated from my husband. He had a serious drug issue, and I got tired of the stress and lying. A friend of mine was moving to Wisconsin, and he offered to help me get out of Florida. I had three teenage kids who were also ready to start a new life, so I took him up on his offer. I had a small car and signed it over to my husband because I couldn't get it to Green Bay. We left in mid-August and arrived in Green Bay about 17 hours later. My friend had rented a home for us and we settled in. It was a perfect neighborhood and we couldn't be happier. One day in September, my kids went to the park that was at the end of the street. I was home alone, just enjoying my new life. I had the front door open and the storm door closed and locked. Then there was a knock at the door. As I turned from the kitchen and took a step toward the door, the strongest feeling of doom overcame me. I was filled with terror. I stopped for a moment in my tracks. Another knock came from the door, and I found myself suddenly standing in front of it. Standing on the top of the step were two young boys, maybe 12 to 13 years old. The terror inside me was so strong that I wanted to vomit. I was shaking when I began to speak, but one of the boys spoke first. "Please, miss, can you let us in? We need to use your phone." My fear was strong, but I answered, "Don't you guys have a phone?" They both turned to each other, not saying a word. Then the boy spoke, changing the question matter. "Please, miss, my brother needs to use your bathroom. We won't hurt you. You don't have to worry. Please give us permission to come in." I said no, I don't think so. There's a gas station on the next corner. The boy's head tilted upward, and his eyes were just two deep, dark pools. Soulless, the other boy also looked at me. "Miss, we need to come in now. Please let us in." I once again responded no. I slammed the door shut and locked the knob, the chain and the deadbolt. I was shaking like I had been in a very cold room. I looked out the peephole, and they were both looking at the door. The one boy kept saying, "Please, let us in. We're cold." How could they be cold? It's 80 degrees outside. I yelled through the door, "Go away, I'm calling the police." I looked out, and they stood there, and they only stepped off the stairs when my boys came walking up the sidewalk. I watched as the boys got to the end of the walkway and turned in the opposite direction of which my boys were coming. They ran up to the door and were surprised to find it locked. I carefully unlocked it and hurried them in and locked it behind them. They asked me who the kids were, and I told them that they were just selling candy for their schools. After that day, I try to stay aware of what's around me. All I know is what I experienced was something out of a horror movie. It traumatized me, and I sleep with the lights on now. I didn't tell my kids until my youngest, a girl, had graduated high school. My oldest son said that the moment he had stepped onto the sidewalk where our house was, he felt the weirdest feeling in the pit of his stomach. He also admitted that he'd seen both of them down on the walking trail, but never since. Every time I think of it, I get sick. What I'm about to tell you happened to me about 4 years ago. I was staying with my dad and stepmom. When I used to go to bed at night, I would lay in bed and watch TV, and often felt like somebody was sitting on the end of my bed. You could see the indent in the mattress, and it used to freak me out. On this particular night, I went to bed as normal, and all seemed to be okay. It was around 12 or so, or just after when I woke up to go to the bathroom. As I got up to turn to get out of bed, I felt something grab my thighs on the inside and hold my legs open. I started to scream, and the cat was in the corner hissing, and its hair was standing up. I couldn't see anyone on top of me, and not sure how long it lasted, but I remember I stood up and switched the light on, and went to the bathroom and thought to myself, did that just happen? In the morning, you could see the bruises on my thighs, and I asked my father, "Didn't you hear me shouting last night?" Our rooms were right next to each other, and he said he heard a soft noise but didn't think anything of it. I don't know what happened to me that night, or what it was, but I do know it was real, and it felt like something very bad was going to happen to me with the way my thighs were grabbed and held down. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I used to sleep in this bedroom where my worst nightmares came true. My house is about 100 years old, and I have only been living in it for about 9 years. Well, I remember many times that something used to sit on the end of my bed, as if it sat there watching me, staring at me. I could physically feel the weight of whatever it was on the end of my bed. At the time, I only lived with my mother and older sister, but they would normally be watching TV in the living room, and all my animals would be out of the room, so it couldn't be any of them. And I don't know why I never opened my eyes to see what it was. And when I did manage to get sleep, I felt as if the bed would spin around and around. The few years I spent in that bedroom were the worst. I would have the same nightmare once a month, every single month. I would wake up in the middle of the night and just puke up all my dinner. I would sweat and pee on myself. I would wake up with scratches and bruises. After my sister left the home, my mother immediately said I could have her room. I've been sleeping in this bedroom since the age of 7, and I haven't had any more encounters. Only the feeling of being watched. And I've only had that nightmare I used to have about 3 times since leaving the bedroom. A group of my friends and I constructed a makeshift Ouija board out of paper and glass. We dimmed the lights and made sure that everyone in the house was in the same room, along with the dog. This house is an old Victorian era house in England, of which I don't know the history. Upon starting the session, we asked a few basic questions such as, "Is there anyone here?" and had little success. However, as we continued, we started to notice strange things happening in the room. Firstly, the dog was freaking out, barking at random spots in the room, and staring at nothing. This was the first unsettling thing. Next, the temperature in the room dropped considerably, and there was a feeling of someone watching us, and breathing on my neck in particular. Then various things happened all at the same time. The curtains blew out into the room, although the window was completely shut. The candlestick on the table lit up without a candle in it, and stayed on for about 5 seconds, and then went out. A loud knocking was heard on the table and walls. This is when everyone freaked out, and we finished the session. One of my friends threw a glass at the wall, which just bounced. I then tried to break it, thinking it was a fluke, but it bounced again. This was the last straw for everyone, and we bolted out of the house. Even today, everyone is scared to talk about this when we chat about the past, and everyone has said that they have felt and seen other presences since that day. One night, when I was 14, I had the scariest experience of my life. I had just finished up fun movie night with my friend, and it was time for me to head home. My house was only 4 blocks away, so I walked home by myself that night. We had different locks on the front and back door, so I had to walk around into my backyard as I only had the key to the back door. My parents always left the light on for me, so the yard was well lit for when I came home every night. As I got into the backyard, I closed the gate behind me, and all of a sudden I heard snickering. I had no idea where it was coming from, so I stood there for a minute and just listened. I heard it again, and then realized it was coming from the yard. It was coming from above me. I walked out into the yard a bit and turned and looked up on the top of my roof. It was a gargoyle. We didn't have gargoyles at my house, so I was confused and stood there for a bit staring at it. After about 20 seconds, his eyes started to light up, and they were red. It started snickering at me and laughing. Then it started yelling my name and pointing at me, yelling, "Shelby, Shelby, I see you." And then it let out an extremely creepy laugh. I was so scared I couldn't even move. Typing out what happened to me made me tear up and shiver. All of a sudden it turned around and climbed to the top of my roof and jumped onto my neighbor's house and then onto the next house and then the next. I ran inside, bawling my eyes out, and couldn't sleep for months. Till this day, I can't sleep sometimes at night because I'll think about it. How did it know my name? What did it want? How did it know where I lived? Where did it go? And was it coming back? I have had many paranormal experiences before, but nothing compares to how scary that night was. The biggest question I have is, what did it want from me?